Continuing my series on greenhouse gas emission, now let us discuss on Scope 3 emission. Scope 3 emission are crucial in understanding companies' full environmental impact because they encompasses all indirect emission not covered by the Scope 1 and Scope 2 occurring across the value chain. These emissions often represent the largest portion of a company's carbon footprint, including activities such as purchase goods and services, business travel, waste disposal, and use of sold products. Addressing Scope 3 is essential for companies aiming to achieve comprehensive carbon reduction goal and for driving sustainability throughout their supply chain. By focusing on Scope 3, companies can influence upstream and downstream processes, encouraging suppliers, customers, and partners to adopt greener practice, thereby amplifying their overall impact on global climate action. In essence, tackling Scope 3 emission is a key to achieving a truly sustainable business model. Here we discuss about the introduction of the Scope 3 emission. The first is indirect value chain emission. Scope 3 emission represents the indirect greenhouse gas emission that occurs across a company's entire value chain, excluding the direct emission covered by Scope 1 and Scope 2. These emissions are generated by activities and assets not owned, directly controlled by the company, but are consequences of its operation. Scope 3 emission covers a broad range of sources from purchased goods and services to employees commuting, business travel, waste disposal, and the use of sold product. Due to their extensive research, Scope 3 emissions are often considered the most challenging aspect of companies' carbon footprints. The next is related to largest source of emission. For many organizations, Scope 3 emissions constitute the largest portion of their total greenhouse gas emission. In sectors like retail, technology, and manufacturing, the majority of the company's carbon footprint can stem from the upstream production of raw material, logistic, and downstream use of the products by consumers. As such, ignoring Scope 3 can result in a significant underestimation of the company's true environmental impact. Addressing these emissions is essential for companies seeking to make meaningful progresses towards sustainable goals. The next is related to the complex to measures. The complexity of measuring Scope 3 emission lies in extensive data collection and coordination required across the entire value chain. Unlike Scope 1 and 2, where emission sources are more directly controlled, Scope 3 involves multiple stakeholders, each contributing to different aspects of the total emissions. Variability in the data accuracy, transparency issues with suppliers, and the need to estimate emission for end-user activities add layers of complexity to measurement process. The next is related to the critical for the comprehensive strategy. Despite of the challenge, integrating Scope 3 emission into companies' greenhouse gas reduction strategies is critical for a comprehensive approach to sustainability. Addressing Scope 3 allows companies to influence broader industries' practice, promote suppliers' sustainability, and create more sustainable products. By doing so, companies not only reduce their carbon footprint but also position themselves as the leaders in corporate responsibility and driving positive environmental impact across their entire value chain. A focus on Scope 3 is increasingly seen as essential for companies committed to achieving long-term sustainability and meeting global climate targets. Now we shall discuss 15 categories of Scope 3 emission, or we can say we will have a summarized information related to 15 categories of Scope 3 emission. Scope 3 emission, also known as indirect emission, are those that occurs outside an organization direct control but are linked to its value chain. These emissions can arise from the activities such as purchase goods and services, transportation, waste disposal, and business travel. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol has identified 15 categories of Scope 3 emissions as narrated in the figure, providing a framework for organizations to assess and manage their indirect emission. Understanding the significance of these 15 categories is crucial for organizations seeking to reduce their overall carbon footprint. By identifying and quantifying their Scope 3 emission, organizations can develop targets, strategies to mitigate their environmental impact. These categories provide a comprehensive framework for organizations to assess their entire value chain emission, enabling them to identify hotspots and prioritize reduction efforts. Further, these 15 categories are critical because as they provide a structured approach to identify, measuring, and managing the emission across an organization's entire value chain. Addressing Scope 3 emission is vital for companies aiming to achieve comprehensive sustainability and the carbon reduction goals. Since Scope 3 emission often constitute the largest portion of a company's total greenhouse gas emission, they represent significant opportunities for impact reduction. Managing these emissions can lead to more sustainable supply chain, reduced operational cost, and enhanced corporate reputation. Lastly, it is important to note that not all categories will be relevant to every company. The World Resources Institute advises that companies should focus on the most relevant and the significant categories for their business and value chain. In this slide, we discuss about the upstream activities under Scope 3 categories. Upstream Scope 3 categories are indirect greenhouse gas emission that occurs in a company value chain before the operational activities. These categories are crucial for organizations to understand and manage their overall environmental impact. The first is related to the purchased goods and services. It encompasses all emissions related to the production of the goods and services brought by the reporting company. This includes raw material, components, and finished product, as well as professional services. To calculate these emissions, companies must consider the entire life cycle of the purchased item from extraction of raw material to manufacturing and transportation. Strategies to reduce emission in this category include supplier engagement, sustainable procurement policies, and redesigning products for the lower environmental impact. The next is related to the capital goods. It refers to final products that have an extended life and are used by the company to manufacture a product, provide a service, or sell, store, and deliver merchandise. Example includes machinery, equipments, buildings, and vehicles. Emissions in these categories are associated with production of these capital goods. Companies can mitigate these emissions by investing in energy efficient equipment, extending the lifespan of existing assets, and considering the circular economy principle in procurement decision. The next is related to fuel energy related activities. It covers emissions related to production of fuel and energy purchased and consumed by the reporting company, which are not included in Scope 1 and Scope 2. This category includes extraction, production, and transportation of fuels, as well as electricity transmission and distribution losses. To reduce emission, companies can implement energy efficiency measures, switch to renewable energy sources, and optimize their energy procurement strategy. The next is related to upstream transportation and distribution. It involves emission from the transportation and distribution of products purchased by the reporting company in vehicles and facilities not owned or controlled by the company. This includes inbound logistics, third-party warehousing, and any intercompany transportation. Strategies to decrease emission in this category includes optimizing transportation route, using more efficient vehicles, consolidating shipments and collaborating with the suppliers to improve logistic efficiency. Continuing from my previous slide, the next is related to the waste generated in operation. This category accounts for emission from the treatment and disposal of waste generated by a company's operation. It includes all types of waste such as solid waste, hazardous waste and wastewater, and their subsequent treatment methods such as landfilling, recycling or incineration. The emission arises from the decomposition of organic waste, the energy used in waste treatment facilities and the transportation of waste. Proper waste management strategy such as reducing waste at the source, improving recycling rates and opting for low emission disposal methods can significantly reduce these emissions. The next is related to business travel. The business travel refers to emission generated by employees' travel for work-related purpose. This includes travel by air, rail, car and other modes of transportation. Air travel in particular is a major contributor to Scope 3 emission due to high carbon intensity of flights. Emissions are calculated based on the distance traveled and the mode of transportation used. Companies can mitigate these emissions by encouraging virtual meeting, using less carbon intensive modes of transportation, promoting the use of public transportation and supporting carbon offset program. The next is related to employee commuting. Employee commuting covers the emission from employees traveling between their homes and to the workplace. This category includes all forms of transportation used by employees such as car, buses, train, bicycles and walking. The emissions are influenced by factors such as the distance traveled, the type of vehicle used and the frequency of commutes. Companies can reduce these emissions by offering incentives for carpooling, providing public transit pass, encourage flexible working arrangements like telecommunicating and supporting the use of low emission vehicle. The other is related to upstream leased assets. Upstream leased asset refers to emission from the operation of asset leased by the reporting company where the emissions are not included in Scope 1 and Scope 2. These could include office building, vehicle or equipment leased from third parties. The emissions are attributed to the lessee based on their use of the assets. Companies can manage these emissions by choosing energy efficient leased assets, negotiating with the lessors for green energy supply and implementing operational efficiency to reduce energy consumptions. Now we shall discuss downstream Scope 3 emission, that refers to indirect greenhouse gas emission that occurs after a product or services has left a company's control. These emissions are crucial to understanding the full environmental impact of a company's activities and product. Key downstream Scope 3 categories include use of sold products, end of life treatment of sold products, downstream transportation and distribution and franchises and investment. Now the first is related to the use of sold product. This category includes emissions that result from the use of goods and services sold by a company. For many companies, especially those in manufacturing or energy sector, this can represent a significant portion of their carbon footprint. For example, an automobile manufacturing would account for the emission produced by the vehicle it sells throughout their operational lifetime. Reducing these emissions involves designing more energy efficient products and encouraging customers to adopt low carbon practice. The next is related to end of life treatment of sold product. This category accounts for emission associated with the disposal and treatment of products after their useful life. This includes activities such as recycling, landfilling, and incineration. Companies can mitigate these emissions by designing products that are easier to recycle, reduce waste, and promoting circular economy practice where products are reused or repurposed rather than disposed of. The next is related to downstream transportation and distribution. Emission in this category comes from the transportation and distribution of products after they have been sold. This includes emission from the logistic and transportation provided that deliver product to end customers, including retail distribution. Companies can reduce these emissions by optimizing their supply chain, improving the efficiency of distribution network, and using lower carbon transportation options. The next is related to processing of the sold product. This category covers emissions generated during the processing of intermediate product sold by company before they reach the final consumer. For instance, if a company sells components that are later assembled into a final product by another company, the emission from that assembly process would fall under this category. These emissions are significant because they often involve energy-intensive manufacturing process. Companies can reduce these emissions by working with their customers to encourage energy efficiency and the adoption of low carbon technologies in processing of these products. Continuing from my previous slide, downstream of Scope 3 categories. The next is related to downstream leased asset. Emission from downstream leased assets refer to those generated by assets that the company owns but lessee to other parties. This could include vehicle, machinery, or building. Since the company retains ownership, it is responsible for the emission associated with the operation of these assets, even though they are operated by the third party. Companies can manage these emissions by implementing energy efficient practice in the leased asset, offering training and guidelines for the lessee, and investing in low emission technology. The next is related to franchise activity. This category involves emission from franchise operation, where a company allows another party to operate a business using its brand, name, and business model. Although franchise operate independently, the parent company is responsible for the associated emissions since they directly benefit from the franchise activity. Reducing emission in this area can be challenging due to the decentralized nature of franchises. However, companies can implement standard environmental policies, offer incentives for energy efficiency, and provide sustainability training to franchise to help mitigate these emissions. The next is related to investment activity. Investment related emissions are those associated with the financial investment a company makes, including equity, debt, and other financial instruments. These emissions are particularly relevant for financial institutions and investment firms, as the activity of these entities in which they invest contribute to their overall carbon footprints. Managing these emissions involves conducting a thorough assessment of the carbon intensity of potential investment and prioritizing investment in low carbon or renewable energy projects. Additionally, investors can engage with the portfolio company to encourage sustainable practices and carbon reduction initiatives. By actively managing downstream Scope 3 emissions, companies can significantly enhance their environmental stewardship and contribute to global efforts to mitigate climate change. Addressing emissions from these downstream activities is crucial for companies to fully understand and reduce their Scope 3 emissions. By focusing on these areas, businesses can significantly impact their overall carbon footprint and contribute to global efforts to mitigate climate change. Furthermore, Managing these emissions can enhance a company's reputation, align with the investors and consumer expectation, and lead to long-term cost saving and business resilience. Now we shall understand challenges in measuring Scope 3 emission. Measuring Scope 3 emission is a complex yet essential aspect of a company's sustainability efforts. These emissions, which occurs along the entire value chain, can be challenging to quantify due to issues such as data availability, boundary setting, double counting, and calculation complexity. The first is related to data availability. One of the prime challenges in measuring Scope 3 emission is the availability of the quality of data. Unlike Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which are directly within a company's control, Scope 3 emissions are dispersed across the supplier, customers, and other external entities. This dispersion often leads to incomplete or inconsistent data, making accurate measurement difficult. Companies may rely on estimates, generic emission factors, or industry average, which can reduce the precision of the calculation. To improve data accuracy, companies need to engage with suppliers and other stakeholders to obtain specific and reliable data. The next is related to boundary setting. Defining the boundaries for the Scope 3 emission is another significant challenge. Company needs to decide which activity within their value chain should be included in their Scope 3 reporting. This involves determining the relevance of each emission source to their overall carbon footprint, which can vary significantly depending on the industries and the company's specific operation. The decision-making process can be complex as it requires balancing completeness with the materiality and feasibility. Improper boundary setting can lead to underreporting or overreporting of emission. The next is related to double counting. Double counting occurs when emissions are inadvertently counted more than once within a company's inventory or across different entities' inventory. This is a common issue in Scope 3 reporting, particularly in shared supply chain where multiple companies may claim the same emission. For instance, if both a supplier and a manufacturer report emission from the same activity, the total emission could be inaccurately inflated. To mitigate, these companies need to clearly define ownership and responsibility for emission within their value chain and coordinate with the other stakeholders. The other challenging part is calculation complexity. The complexity of calculating Scope 3 emission can be daunting. Emission factor, data from suppliers, and various calculation methodologies are contribute to the difficulties for generating accurate Scope 3 estimate. The variability in process, geographical location, and technology used by different suppliers further complicates these calculations. Companies must often use complex model and assumption, which can introduce uncertainty into result. Addressing these challenges requires a concreted efforts involving better data management, clear communication with the stakeholder, and the use of standardized methodologies. Now we shall discuss what are the strategies for measuring Scope 3 emission. Measuring Scope 3 emission is crucial for organizations to understand their full environmental impact and identify opportunities for reduction. Effective strategies can help overcome the challenges associated with the complex tasks. The first is related to prioritize categories. Not all Scope 3 categories are equal, relevant, or significant for every organization. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol recommends prioritizing the category based on their size, influence, risk, stakeholder, and sector guidance. By focusing on the most material category, companies can allocate resources more effectively. For instance, a technology company might prioritize purchased goods and services and use of sold products, while the financial institute might focus on investment. The next is engaging suppliers. Collaboration with the suppliers is key to obtaining accurate primary data. The CDP suggests implementing suppliers engagement program, which can include survey, workshop and incentives for data sharing. For example, Walmart project Gigaton engage suppliers to report and reduce emission, demonstrating how large companies can leverage their influence to improve value chain data quality. Another is related to using industry average. When primary data is unavailable, the industry average can provide a starting point for emission calculations. The Global Logistic Emission Council framework offers standardized methodologies and emission factor for logistic related activities. Similarly, Quanti's Scope 3 evaluator tool provides sector-specific emission factors for quick estimation. The next is related to investing in robust system, or we can say implement data management system. Implementing sophisticated data management system is crucial for handling the complexity of Scope 3 emission. The Science-Based Target Initiative emphasizes the importance of investing in tools that can collect, manage and analyze emission data across value chain. For instance, Microsoft Clouds for Sustainability exemplify how technology can streamline emission data management and reporting. These strategies should be implemented as a part of comprehensive approach to Scope 3 measurement. The World Business Council for Sustainability Development recommends step-by-step processes, identify relevant Scope 3 activities, determine the scope of data collection, collect data, apply emission factor and assess data quality. As organizations progress in their Scope 3 measurement journey, they should aim to continually improve data quality and expand the breadth of their inventory. This iterative process, as described by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, allows companies to start with estimates and progressively refine their approach as they gain more insight and access to better data. This slide discusses an example for Scope 3 emission in retail. The slide presents a breakdown of Scope 3 emissions for what appears to be a retail company. Scope 3 emission refers to indirect greenhouse gas emission that occurs in a company value chain outside of its direct operation. Here are a summary of the data as shown in the slide. The first is related to the purchased goods and services. This is by far the largest category, accounting for 5 lakh tons CO2 emission, tons of a carbon dioxide equivalent annually, or 60% of the total Scope 3 emission. This likely represents the emission associated with production of goods the retailer sell. The second is related to the use of sold products. The second largest at 2 lakhs ton CO2 emitted, or 24% of the total. This represents emission from customer using the product sold by the retailer. The next is related to transportation and distribution. This accounts for 1 lakh ton CO2 emitted, or 12% of the total emission. This likely includes both upstream and downstream logistics. The other is related to other categories. These make up a remaining 33,000 tons of CO2 emission, or 4% of the emission. The total Scope 3 emission for this company add up to 8,33,000 tons of CO2 emitted annually. This breakdown is typical for many retailers, where the majority of the emissions occurs in the supply chain, that is purchased goods and services, and from the use of product they sell. It highlights the importance of working with the suppliers and influencing consumer behavior to significantly reduce overall emissions. Now we shall discuss what are the strategies for reducing Scope 3 emission. Reducing Scope 3 emission, which occurs throughout a company's value chain, is essential for comprehensive climate action. These emissions often represent the largest portion of a company's carbon footprint. Effective strategies for reducing Scope 3 emission include supplier engagements, product design optimization, transportation optimization, and adopting circular economy initiatives. The first is related to supplier engagement. Engaging with the supplier is crucial since a significant portion of the Scope 3 emission originate in the supply chain. Companies can work closely with their suppliers to encourage the adoption of low carbon practice, improve energy efficiency, and transition to renewable energy sources. This can be achieved through collaboration, setting sustainability criteria in procurement process, and offering support for supplier sustainability initiative. For instance, major corporations like Walmart and Unilever have launched programs to reduce emission across their supply chain by collaborating with their suppliers. According to the Carbon Disclosure Project, supplier engagement is one of the most effective strategies for reducing Scope 3 emission. The next is related to product design. Optimizing product design for sustainability is another effective strategy. This involves designing products that are more energy efficient, require fewer raw material, and have a longer lifespan. Companies can also focus on reducing the environmental impact during the use of phase of the product by incorporating energy saving feature or promoting the use of low carbon alternative. For example, companies in the electronic industries have successfully reduced emission by designing products. That importance of product designing in reducing the lifespan emission of goods and services. Another is related to the transportation optimization. Emission from transportation and distribution are significant contributors to Scope 3 emission. Companies can reduce these emissions by optimizing their logistic network, improving fuel efficiency, and shifting to lower emission transportation modes such as rail or electricity vehicle. Additionally, companies can explore options like reducing the distance product travel, consolidating shipments, and choosing more sustainable packaging material. For instance, companies like ECA have implemented transportation strategy that includes maximizing the efficiency of ship container and investing in electric delivery truck. The Environmental Protection Agency, that is EPA, provides a guidance on transportation optimization as a key element in reducing emission. The next is related to circular economy initiative. Adopting circular economy principle can significantly reduce Scope 3 emission by keeping products, material, and resources in use for as long as possible. Strategies include designing for recyclability, encouraging product take-back program, and promoting the reuse and refurbishment of products. Companies like Patagonia and Apple have pioneered circular economy initiative focusing on extending product life cycle and reducing waste. By implementing these strategies, companies can make significant progress in reducing Scope 3 emissions, thereby contributing to the global efforts to mitigate climate change. Well, with this, we conclude the series related to greenhouse gas emission. But there are many issues yet to be resolved. However, what next after the Scope 1, 2 and 3? Wait, there is more serious issue related to these three scopes of greenhouse gas emissions. Thus, next week we will dive into one more engaging topic, that is why greenhouse gas audit matters. Till then, I wish you all a happy and prosperous week ahead.